Hello, I'm Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Literary Love 123, where I combine my master's in English with my passion for the horror genre to talk about the books that I read. Today's video is part 4 of my 5-part series, 50 Years, 50 Horror Books That Shaped Me, in honor of my 50th birthday this month. So we'll get right to the books after this quick intro. I apologize if my voice sounds a little rough. I am dealing with some serious seasonal allergies. They are kicking my butt right now. Also, for that reason, today's video is probably going to be a bit shorter than the others, and I will not be talking in detail about today's books. So, thank you for your understanding. And before I get to part 4, I will tell you that I'll link parts 1 through 3 down in the description box below in case this is the first time you're seeing this series and you're interested in going back and seeing the first 3 parts. You can do that. So let's get right into the books. So the first one I want to talk about in part 4 of my 50 years, 50 horror books that shaped me is The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle. And this is a person of color's take on H.P. Lovecraft. And if you know anything about H.P. Lovecraft, you know his extreme racism, xenophobia, and you know that comes through in his stories. And the horror, I think, is the horror at Red Hook is one of the examples of Lovecraft's racism. And Victor LaValle takes that and turns it on his head, and writes The Ballad of Black Tom. So I'm just going to tell you what this is about by reading the back because I'm just not feeling up to doing much more. And I apologize for that. Charles Thomas Tester hustles to put food on the table to keep the roof over his father's head from Harlem to Flushing Meadows to Red Hook. He knows what magic a suit can cast, the invisibility a guitar case can provide, and the curse written on his skin that attracts the eyes of wealthy white folks and their cops. But when he delivers an occult book to a reclusive sorceress in the heart of Queens, Tom opens a door to a deeper realm of magic and earns the attention of things best left sleeping. A storm that might swallow the world is building in Brooklyn. Will Black Tom live to see it break? And it's just fantastic. Obviously, I love it because it's included in my list. So the next book I want to talk about is actually a memoir, but it is definitely within horror, in my opinion. And that is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. In this book, Carmen Maria Machado takes the idea of a memoir and she combines different genres to create the narrative of her recollection of an abusive relationship that she experienced. She talks about memoir as a haunted house, as erotica, as a building's Raman. And so just some of the examples here that I want to give you: dream house as accident, dream house as ambition, dream house as memory, dream house as Bluebeard, dream house as American Gothic. So you get the idea. And this is such a unique and brilliant way to tell a story about your life. And I was blown away by how she could convey the horrors of that abusive relationship, yet write it in such a beautiful and just intelligent way. The next book I want to talk about is The Haunting of Alejandra by V. Castro. So, this book is about Alejandra, who is dealing with major depressive disorder. And she's also experiencing some type of postpartum depression. And it draws on the lore of La Llorona. But this book was such a visceral and raw experience for me. If you've read V. Castro before, you know that she has a very, a very powerful style of writing as far as just blatantly saying things and evoking certain moods and tones. And that felt very appropriate for a book dealing with depression and dealing with those intrusive thoughts that those of us with depression experience. And I won't say much more about this because I have an entire video where I talk about my experience with this book. And so I will link that down in the description box below. And you can go check that out if that's something you're interested in. The next book I want to talk about is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I don't have a physical copy of this book, but I really hope to get one soon. I listened to it on audiobook several years ago, and it is about a bride of Dracula. It is from her perspective, and it's not a spoiler that you know at the beginning that eventually she kills Dracula, and it's all about her being turned into a vampire by Dracula, her experiences in an abusive relationship with Dracula, and it is written so beautifully. The writing absolutely stunning. So it just gave me a fresh perspective on Dracula. It gave me a fresh perspective on what it may have been like to be a bride of Dracula, because in the original novel, we only get that quick glimpse of them as they are trying to seduce and consume Jonathan Harker. So to hear a story from a perspective of a bride just gave a fresh outlook on Dracula. So the next book I want to talk about is A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. I've loved everything by T. Kingfisher that I've read. But this one is my very favorite. So let me just tell you a little bit about it. It's a haunting Southern Gothic. It explores dark, twisted roots lurking just beneath the veneer of a perfect home and family. So you have a daughter who goes back to live with her mother for a period of time, and her mother lives in the grandmother's house. And as the daughter goes back to spend time with her mother, she notices that her mother is different. Her mother seems afraid of something. There is a presence of her grandmother still in the house, and things that her mother would never have done before, she's doing now. So the question is, why is her mother doing this? And what's going on? It's got horror elements for sure, but it's also got a lot of heart and a lot of humor. T. Kingfisher writes these really quirky, realistic characters who are dealing with horrifying situations, but they're also reacting in, kind of funny ways sometimes. And I am very picky about combining horror with humor, but the way T. Kingfisher does it is just spot on. So the next book I want to talk about is Crossroads by Laurel Hightower. This is a grief novel. It draws comparisons, rightfully so, to Pet Cemetery, except this time we're getting the perspective of a mother who has dealt with the death of an older child. And it is about the lengths that she will go to be able to see, speak, and spend time with her deceased child. It's gut wrenching, it's disturbing, but it is a very powerful story of a mother's love and grief. So, the next book I want to talk about is American Rapture by C.J. Lead. This is a book about a virus that causes people not only to become physically ill, but they also become violent, particularly sexually violent. And it is also about a young girl grappling with the deep religious indoctrination she's experienced. It's about her grappling with the purity culture that she's been entrenched in as she tries to survive in this raptured or apocalyptic world. And again, I'm not going to say a lot about this because I have an entire vlog devoted to reading this book and talking about my experiences with it. And it was a very cathartic experience for me because I was raised in fundamentalist evangelical um indoctrination, that type of religion, and also deeply, deeply grew up entrenched in purity culture. So this book was difficult for me to read, but I felt so seen, so validated, and it was a healing experience for me. And so, like I said, I will link that vlog down below in the description box if you would like to hear more about my experience with that book. The next book I want to talk about, shifting gears a little bit to something lighter, and that is Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison. I like most of her books, but I particularly want to highlight Such Sharp Teeth because it takes the idea of a werewolf and combines that with a feminist bent. If you know anything about Rachel Harrison, you know that she's very much a feminist writer and writes about things that are pressing and challenging for women. And in Such Sharp Teeth, she takes the werewolf theme and does that very, very powerfully. And at the same time, you also have not the main character, but her twin sister who is pregnant. So she's also dealing with bodily changes. And the way that Rachel Harrison was able to kind of juxtapose and draw comparisons also between the idea of a werewolf and a woman's pregnancy was just a fresh take on werewolves, and I very, very much enjoyed that one. And then finally, no, I've got two more. Sorry. So, not quite finally. The next book I want to talk about, I should have included in my first video where I talked about classics that have shaped me, but I somehow forgot about it. And that is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. And this book, I first really experienced the legend of the Headless Horseman or Sleepy Hollow through Disney, through their cartoon that used to come on around Halloween. But as I got a little bit older, I finally read the actual story, and I loved it. I thought it was fun. Most of the time I spent thinking about the Headless Horseman and Ichabod and questioning whether or not the Headless Horseman was real or whether it was Braun pretending. But then I revisited this book in grad school in my American Renaissance course. And that's when I really discovered that there are so many layers to this story that go deeper than just the story of the Headless Horseman. It is about early, colonial times. It is about the grappling from this old way of doing things and a new progressive way of doing things. It's about conflict between the Dutch and the English settlers. And it's just so much richer and deeper than I knew. So that really, maybe it does make sense that I put it in this later video so I can include the way that it shaped my thoughts about what the story really is about once I was able to be, immersed kind of in the way that Irving was constructing this modern sort of folklore for America when it was newly established, right? Of course, there had been people here for a long time prior to that. But that's a topic that is not on tap for today. So finally, the last book I want to talk about in this video is a nonfiction book. And I'm currently rereading it right now, and that is The Monstrous Feminine: Film, Feminism, and Psychoanalysis by Barbara Creed. And this is the second edition. So, just quickly, in The Monstrous Feminine, Barbara Creed draws on Julia Kristova's theory of abjection to challenge the popular view that women in horror are almost always victims. She takes that and turns it on its head and talks about different types of monstrous feminine. So I'm not going to go over all of it. I'm just going to do just a quick little intro or discussion about the different monstrous feminine elements that she talks about. She talks about woman as possessed mother, woman as monstrous womb. She talks about the archaic mother, woman as vampire, woman as witch. And then in part 2, she talks about Medusa's head, the vagina dentata. Love vagina dentata. And Freudian theory. She talks about the femme castratrice and the castrating mother. And finally, in part 3, she talks about the monstrous feminine as virginal dentata, the monstrous feminine as sentient zombie, and the monstrous feminine as uncanny creatrix. So this book shapes a lot of the way I view women in horror and the way that I not only analyze books I read, but also movies I watch, because as you can see on the cover, film that Barbara Creed does use film to talk about the different types of monstrous women. So again, I apologize for the way my voice sounds, for the lack of probably coherence, coherence in this video. But if you hung here till the end, thank you so much for watching. I would appreciate it if you would hit that like, subscribe, hit that bell, leave a comment. If you want to leave a comment and you don't know what to say, you could leave me some sort of birthday emoji for 50th birthday. Any other emoji you think fits. And I will see you again in the next video. Also, part 5 will drop next Wednesday, and that will be the final in this series. Thank you again for watching. Bye.